Hey, it's a good morning, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Freedom FANatics. I'm Alex, your host. Alongside with me, I have my awesome colleagues, Tiejo and Sholin. Welcome to the show, gents. It's good to have you here.
That way.
Thanks, Alex. It's always good to
Okay.
be on the show.
Guys, so today we've got some interesting topics lined up. A little bit different. Each kind of reveals its own issues in its own right. So we're gonna kick off this episode with a rather disturbing story emerging from the Eastern Cape. And this is courtesy of News 24, and it is about an Eastern Cape teacher who has been striked off the teacher's role. So he will not be able to be a teacher in South Africa. And essentially, what the crux of the story is that on the 1st of March last year, the principal of a Eastern Cape school, Lubeko Mgandela, forced an 11-year-old pupil to recover his cell phone in a pit toilet after it fell in whilst he was using it. His fellow students recall seeing him the student covered in feces after retrieving the cell phone. And there was outrage at uh, this very disturbing event, and he has now been removed from the teacher's role. And I think it's good to see that there's been accountability has been served. But I think first things first, Sholin, at our big age in 2022, 27 odd years into democracy, why do we still have pit toilets at our schools?
Yeah, man. I feel like it's seriously disappointing that this is the case, especially when we have this new education system. We have leaders that receive large amounts of funds to actually improve the state of our education in the country, and once again, it's a failure on the side of those who are responsible for electing him. That's and for actually giving him the position in the first place. And I think this actually speaks to the fact that school governing bodies are a crucial part of school life, because they should be given more authority when it comes with regards to appointing the principals, the teachers who actually teach their kids. Because I feel like that's direct accountability in this case, where they could have been the first persons to actually first elect the person that that is the principal of the school, and then also then the school governing body should also have the responsibility to actually remove those who are not actually serving their kids to the best possible extent that they can. And I mean, education is so crucial for any country, because it's like first you get education, you
Mm,
then go on to innovation, you are then able to compete in a free market, and your country is then able to actually experience prosperity. And if we cannot even achieve and give learners the basic safety and security that they require for an education, the rest, innovation, a free market, all of those things are stifled.
mm.
And this just comes back to having the getting the basics right first. Yeah.
Absolutely. Tiejo, I mean, when it comes to schools, one of the most important aspects is the principal. A principal controls and the teaching body should be leading by example. We've seen in low resource schools where there is an involved parent body and a strong principal. You can really flourish against the odds. And I guess one of the aspects of this story is that we can kind of take solace in is that there has been some accountability. Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, on that level, we can expect that this is a good thing that there is some sort of ramifications here. Um, how do you think communities in places like the rural Eastern Cape can ensure that there are these bodies, school governing body infrastructure? Parents don't necessarily have the most time to get involved in their children's education. What are some things that maybe parents can do ensure that their children don't end up at the bottom of a pit latrine. It sounds crazy to even say that.
Sure. Well, I think the school governing body is a good place to start, as Sholen has already mentioned. I think parents need to become more involved in the schooling lives of their kids. And parents need to constantly be in communications with schools to always be aware of what's happening at school and stuff. Now, I think it's quite shameful that what has happened, but I'm quite glad that the South African Council of Education intervened, and really, I personally think that they intervened in the right manner. But of course, the legality of everything and the extent of the intervention is something that lawyers in particular would have to look at. I am not particularly trained for that. But
Mm.
I think what's equally shameful is that we still have around 3,200 schools in the country that are still using pit toilets. And this is
Mm.
after we lost lives of young people like Michael Komape, who I've mentioned before, who passed away in 2014, who was 5 years old, fell into a pit toilet. We also have a young person in the Eastern Cape who in 2017, walls of a pit toilet came down on him, and as a result of that, he passed away. I think it's shameful that we still have such things, and even after these incidences, that the government has not intervened and ensured that all pit toilets are demolished. I think, it's the story. The principal story is quite shameful, but equally shameful is the fact that the Department of Education is failing to deliver the very basic services at our schools.
No, for sure. What I'm gonna bring in our next story, which is, and we'll maybe have a broader discussion around the two combined. And this is something that I think, particularly in the light of load shedding rearing its ugly head again last week in particular, is the idea of the provision of services. Now, in Johannesburg, there have been protests ongoing in the past few weeks, and in particularly in Joburg South of late, there's been no water. Now, the reasons given for the lack of water was, there's failing infrastructure. There was an explosion at a pump station. There was a power failure at a purification plant, and as a result, the water outage has been going on for a couple of days there. We know there was in Pretoria, there was in large parts of Gauteng, there was a water shutdown to do maintenance, and that lasted 2 or 3 days. Now, gents, what I want to kind of chat about here, Sheldon, and I'll come to you, is just how we talk. On the one hand, we're talking about schools that don't have access to municipal services to be able to have flushing toilets at their schools, but in the same sense, in some of our biggest cities, we're struggling to maintain what's already there. How does this disruption to South Africans' lives affect their ability to support their own families and get ahead in life?
Yeah, actually, Alex, I'd like to point out as well that, a few months ago, there was also a water outage in Johannesburg, actually. And back then, our water and sanitation minister stated that there was no water crisis in the country,
Mm,
and people just went along and believed it. But fast forward to March 2022, and South Africa's literal economic hub, Johannesburg, is experiencing another water outage.
mm,
And some of the reports date back to the actually research done by the Institute of Regulation. Back in 2015, in a
mm,
policy bulletin, the IRR actually warned that because South Africa is a water constrained country, it's crucial that we actually conserve and manage what water we have available now. We must manage that well. And it's actually been noted that the ANC government has, since 1994, actually failed at planning strategically for the
mm,
future. And my question is essentially, how much more mismanagement must we endure? Because first we experienced load shedding, now we're going to start experiencing water shedding. My real question is, what next? The basic
yeah.
services that literally keep our society afloat: electricity, water, education, everything has literally failed, and it's only making life more difficult for ordinary South Africans. And I feel like this is the perfect opportunity to actually highlight why state proofing yourself is so important, because we the government fails. I feel like it's our responsibility to step in, because I clearly dependence on the state is not a realistic expectation.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting point you raised there because, Tiago, I mean, state proofing yourself is all very well if you have the means and the mobility within the community to rally people together, maybe to put together funds and step in where the government has let people down. Um, More and more, I'm starting to think that, aside from just rocking up on voting day and making your say at the ballot box, what solutions are there? Because there is an element here where we have to get the government to do something. Because we've seen polling where people were asked, what is the best way to improve people's lives, and this comes from the Institute of Race Relations, and it's over 70% say either a combination of more jobs and better education and better delivery of services such as electricity, water, and sanitation. And this is where I want to bring in the two topics this morning. Is without the sophisticated delivery, or at least sufficient delivery of services, as we see with schools, that undermines the ability of people to get an education. So where to from here? If we don't have the one, it seems like we can't really have the other.
Sure. Well, I think what needs to happen is that citizens, South African citizens, all of us combined, really, have to become active citizens. We need to start attending public meetings, public government meetings, for example, at local government level when uh, municipal plans are being drawn up. We have to be there as citizens. These plans have to talk to our direct needs as residents of municipalities, right? We need to be active, pressurize the government to actually put those plans into place. Now, the water issue, it's a two-sided issue. Firstly, there is a water scarcity issue in the country, of course. But secondly, there is an infrastructure issue all over South Africa, really. The infrastructure issue relates to the fact that the government of the day has, over the years, failed to maintain infrastructure the way it should have maintained it. And in instances that it has built new water infrastructure, they have not built quality water infrastructure. And of course, this ties into to the question of cadre deployment and staff. Tenders in municipalities, tenders in departments are given to comrades. Comrades always are looking at delivering services at the lowest cost possible, even if it means going for poor quality material, right? So they can capitalize and be able to share profits with their politician friends and stuff of that nature. It needs to start at that level. Citizens must go, hold government to account, attend public meetings, attend council sessions, ensure that the best people are appointed to deliver services and stuff of that nature. Otherwise, we'll end up in the same circle whereby we elect people into place, they do whatever they want to do and simply get away with it because we are sitting at home comfortably or complaining from our couches at home and not actively participating in our local government politics.
Charlotte, how can people through FAN, what can people do to reach out to us? How can FAN be an outlet for people to, get ahead in life? Get the freedom to earn, get the freedom to lead. We saw last week that FAN went to visited the High Court in the Northwest to fight for a small political party that deserved a seat that they had won in that local municipality. That's just one way that FAN is helping to get people the freedom to lead and ensuring that democracy stays intact. People can reach out to us. What should people do?
Yeah, for sure. I always encourage people to get involved in FAN. I mean, FAN is a young, energetic organization, and we have a lot of fight in us. As proven a few weeks ago, we actually took the EFF to court, and we will do that with any political or governmental organization out there if we see that they are actually, negatively impacting the lives of South Africans. So
Mm.
you can definitely get involved in FAN. You can go to our website. You can sign up. You can support us. You can engage with our content, literally share our content as far and as best as you can. We are literally on every social media platform advocating for freedom on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, even on TikTok as well. And if that's the least you can do to actually engage and be a active participant in fighting for your freedom, that's more than enough. And that's why supporting organizations like FAN is going to be a crucial manner in which we keep our leaders accountable. And yeah, if you can even extend beyond that. I mean, FAN will never turn away financial support. I don't think we will ever do that. So that we can actually have more members engage in this fight for your freedom. So yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Teko, any last words before we wrap up this today's show?
Well, the last words would be that I think really, really, really in South Africa, we need a strong civil society sector. Electing, simply going to the ballots and 5 years later returning there again does not ensure that services are delivered to us. That does not ensure that promises made to us by political organizations that we elect into government are indeed brought to life. We really need to, as citizens, rise up to the occasion and actively participate in our government. After all, we are the people who are funding this government. Like I said last week, we should start treating government like a company, and we should start treating ourselves like shareholders in a company. Now, as a shareholder of a company, you must have an interest in how the company is operated and how things matters of the company go. So I really, really do urge South African citizens to start participating in public dialogues organized by the government, organized by civil society, and to take ownership of the government. And I think that's the only way that real change can come about. We can elect new political parties, elect new political leaders into place, but if we are not going to actively hold them to account, actively ensure that things are implemented, we might as well do away with the voting system. I mean, it's useless if we are not going to participate. Sure.
Yeah, Alex, I'd just like to add on to what Diego says, that is a very crucial point, is that we cannot wait for every 5 years to actually, suddenly pull up on the scene. Like now we actually need to be active in and out of election season. And that's exactly what FAN does. We advocate for freedom, for accountability when it's cool and when it's not. Like, and it doesn't matter who the adversary is. That's what we do. So yeah, Tiago, that's a really important point to raise.
Yeah, I think Tiago also makes a good point. I think one thing to bear in mind is that a lot of people participate in they show their discontent with government through protests, through service delivery protests, and unfortunately we've got a situation where service delivery protests keep growing, and the number of people participating in our elections is shrinking. So I think we've got to build and not burn. And I think on that note, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet, follow us at Badger of Liberty. You can find our stuff, as Sholin said, wherever you are. So guys, with that in mind, your freedom is worth fighting for. We'll see you guys in Burning Questions coming up next.
Let's go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of hashtag burning questions. Hi Alex, hi Sholin, hi Diego.
Is it?
Hi,
Hey,
Mbali.
Mbali. Good seeing you.
Cool. Guys, so today the code card we're looking at is very, very interesting. I have a few thoughts and a few comments on it. But this code card is
Mhm.
from Robert Woodson and it reads: This hyper obsession with race causes some to find fake racism under every rock. What we need to do is to invest in what our communities actually need. We must stop going after systematic racism and tackle real problems. So, okay, guys, first question, I think let me throw it to Shodan. Is there something called fake racism? Is there such a thing?
Um, Yeah, they absolutely is something called as fake racism. I know that's a
Okay.
bit controversial because usually what I truly believe is that racism is a problem, but it is not
Mm-hmm.
the problem.
Mm-hmm.
As a lot of the content fan has covered, we really highlight real issues actually impacting South Africans, where service delivery fails, where the state has not actually, been able to protect citizens. Those are all things we strive for. Things like education are crucial topics that need to be discussed. And
Mm.
usually, what takes place is Big Daddy Liberty explains it brilliantly when he says that we shouldn't be dribbled and distracted. And
Mm.
racism is a key issue with which political leaders actually dribble and distract ordinary South Africans. And there
Mm.
is fake racism that we are experiencing throughout the world, actually, because we have a lot of
Mhm.
race merchants and people who actually profit financially from
Yeah.
actually consulting on racist issues. And
Yeah.
these are people that are suddenly now called, Alex will know them, will know the good terms for them. They are now diversity consultants, and racial empowerment guys, like, bruh, come on, get out of here. We know the real issues actually affecting South Africans.
Yeah.
Racism is one of the least problems that we actually have to face. And even some of the research that RR does actually clearly indicate to us that South Africans actually care about, can do they have a job? Can they send their
Mm.
kids to a proper school?
Yeah.
These are issues that we actually care about. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's about it from my side, Bali.
Okay. Alex, fake racism, yes, no, maybe sometimes.
Hmm. Often, often. But I think, yeah, look, you can't dismiss somebody's sort of experience of racism, and I
Mm.
think it's not to say
Yeah.
that racism doesn't permeate through a society. I think eliminating such a thing is a pipe dream.
Mm.
But you know what I mean. I think what's interesting is that what I've started to think about more and more is how do we tackle racialism compared to racism. So
Mm.
racialism in the sense of what is, if we look at the way that race politics, for lack of a better term, is
Yeah.
enacted through legislation. We've got the
Mm-hmm.
Employment Equity Amendment Bill, which is currently before President Ramaphosa. And effectively, what that would do is it would allow the Minister of Labor to punish companies who don't meet certain quotas.
Yeah.
And that would take, would drain some, as an example, um, one of the sort of ramifications would be that they would
Mhm.
fine you 10% of your revenue
Oh
if you
my
don't meet
God.
these targets. So we've got to start thinking about, okay, how would these policies, which are racialist,
Mm-hmm.
affect ordinary people? And
Yeah.
then when you start looking at quotas in companies, you know when you start eliminating merit and meritocracy
Mm.
based on race, people are going to start building resentment. So does that then foster, racist attitudes towards people, or start creating disharmony rather?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's a slightly different angle.
Yeah.
There seems to have been a lot of racism scandals this year in schools.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. But I think what we need to address is how within institutions those allegations are dealt with, whether it's in the example of a school is like, how do you sort of balance listening to your student body versus your own protocols with bringing in disciplinary proceedings, that kind of stuff. So I think it is something that there is both fake and real, but we need to make sure that we kind of balance the two. Um, in a very kind of mediated sense, it's a very emotional topic always, and so let's look at what is the real picture here, because it does have some real world ramifications for a lot of people.
Yeah, it definitely does. And then maybe let me come to you, Diego. So the last part of this code reads, we must stop going after systematic racism and tackle real problems. What are these real problems that we need to tackle?
Well, I think first and foremost, context is everything, right? In the South African, well, let's begin by defining systematic racism, right? Systematic racism refers to a form of racism that is embedded in a country's laws and regulations. Now, in the South African context, we have policy positions such as BEE that have been made law, right?
Yeah.
They are active laws of the country. And in such an instance, I think then that systematic racism becomes a real issue that must be tackled. So context is everything. So whereas I understand what the point that he's trying to make, in the South African context, we definitely must go after systematic racism, such as BEE, a policy position that advantages one race over the other. And it doesn't really matter what the intention of that policy position is in this instance. What remains factual is that BE is a racist policy position, and it's a form of racism that is carried out systematically, and we definitely have to fight it. We must fight systematic racism where we do find it. Perhaps where he is, or at least where he was when he said this, the case was not similar to the South African case. But in our instance, we must definitely fight systematic racism if we are to get anywhere as a country.
Can I jump in, Bali?
Yeah, sure, Alex, you can jump in.
I just want to, because I think what he's referring to when it comes to at least the arguments that I've heard for systemic racism, is more like Tioko's spot on about systematic racism and at a policy level, but definitely in university corridors, I've heard the thing of like 400 years of colonialism, apartheid, all these things. So I think when people talk about systemic racism, it's about this like overarching superpower that kind of feeds in and undermines people's opportunities. So I think there's so many layers to this. Because people say, like, I think it has more to do with like victimhood. People feel like they are oppressed by the system. In South Africa, modern day South Africa, exactly in the example Tieko cites, is oppression via the system is through systematic racism, such as BE legislation. But it's complicated.
It's complicated. Wow, Alex, it is. But maybe, guys, you can go, Tieko.
Well, I'd still argue, even the argument that, and that's an argument that's made by the left many a times, right? But it remains systemic racism or systematic racism remains racism that is embedded in laws and regulations of a country. Even throughout those years, the left speak of that systemic racism because it's a kind of racism that was, in a way, turned into laws. Now, the only thing that has changed, of course, over the years is that it has now turned. At first, it was against Black people, and now it's against white people. But it remains systemic racism, and it should be tackled for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so what are the real problems? I don't think I got to understand what the real problems are. Or maybe systemic racism is one of them. But maybe, Sholen, another problem we should address in this country, because people might be like, yeah, you guys are just telling us that racism is not the biggest problem. But then tell us what the problem is.
Yeah, no,
Roland?
big problem that really affect us is, I would say, things like corruption,
Mm-hmm.
a failing education system,
Yep.
a failing supply of electricity. Like, you cannot even, when people are struggling in a war zone and there's no electricity, there's no education system, they do not look for, you know what, racism is the problem. Nah, like even us, if we leave the house every day, we aren't thinking about, this big racist boogeyman is going to come and get us. We too
Bro.
busy focused on trying to secure the bag, fam. Like, you know
You
what I mean?
know?
Yeah, exactly. Like when
Yeah.
things get really, really hard, people do not really think about, you know what, it's because of racism.
Mm.
Politicians like to make us think that. I would actually like Alex also to touch on what's actually happening at the Human Rights Commission, because
Mm.
when things get tough and petrol prices are rising and you start seeing that taxes are going up, suddenly politicians want you to start focusing on racism to
Bro.
actually distract you from their failures.
Yeah.
So that's something I would definitely caution against.
Definitely. Alex, do you have anything to add there?
Mm.
Oh, Diego,
Yeah,
we
no,
can
I
specific
think
the country.
I- if I'm not mistaken, with the current Human Rights Commission sort of investigation into racism in advertising, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they might have found that there was no racism in that Tresemme advert, which I think triggered the EFF's protest against
Oh,
Click,
yeah.
if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. So, I mean, I don't, so I think ordinary South Africans know this,
Yeah.
that, trashing a Click store, it ties in exactly what Sholin's just said about politicians sort of using issues for their own gain. Trashing a Click store isn't going to make sure that, like we spoke about on Freedom Fanatics, that my child doesn't drown in a pit toilet, or
No.
affect my ability to get an education and get ahead in life. So,
Mm.
people want to be safe, they want to learn, they want to get, put food on the table. So there's a lot of we've got a lot of real problems in South
Yeah.
Africa.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
definitely
And
do
it's
have
and it's
bigger
usually,
problems.
yeah, and like the EFF, it's usually the biggest race hustlers who are doing the most
Bro.
destruction of people's livelihoods. So that's another thing to actually note.
That time this episode is the colors are red. I don't know, it's kinda you're contradicting yourself. But guys, we are not pro EFF, please.
Yeah.
Well,
Diego,
I,
any last
I
words?
was, yeah, my last words would be that in the South African context, racism is a serious issue. Racism is an issue that we should be amongst issues that we prioritize in dealing with, right? The fact that Alex, being a white guy, could have doors of an institution of higher learning closed against him simply because he's white, even though he does qualify to get into the institute. The fact that Alex cannot get a job in a certain department because black people must be hired first and foremost,
Yeah.
it's a very serious issue. It stands against white people achieving whatever it is that they'd like to achieve in certain instances. And yeah, for that reason, it's a very serious issue that we must really prioritize when tackling. But of course, there are those matters of fake outrages around racism and stuff. It's as though I find it amazing these days, né? That when, let's say, if Alex is rude towards me, first thing the left would jump. The first conclusion the left would jump to is that Alex is racist. So people can no longer just be rude. People can no longer just be
Yeah.
human beings that are not decent, and stuff of that nature. It's a crazy idea, but systematic racism that does exist in South Africa, and it must be dealt with as soon as possible if we are to get far as a country. Sure.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. If I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to add something to what Diego said. Was that, yeah, Diego, I would actually go even further on your point about things like employment equity and BE, because even though they say that, that they're trying to rectify some historical injustice, the real people that's actually being excluded are actually Black, colored, and Indian South Africans as well. Because what we actually see with things like BEE, which is a racialized policy, the people that actually do benefit the most are the politically connected elites. And it actually comes down to who I know, that's the people I give the job to. And it's not actually about the qualified and experienced and talented Black, colored, Indian, white entrepreneurs in South Africa. It's actually only about those who are connected.
Yeah, no, definitely. I need to get me some connections, I need to know someone who knows someone who knows someone.
If you
Guys,
have
thank you.
anyone, pass them on.
Oh, okay. Don't worry. I'll hook you up, guys. Jokes. I don't know why. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Burning Questions. Do remember, your freedom is worth fighting for.